Hello, my name is Royletta Romaine. I'm the owner of Healing by the Forkful, and I'm a registered dietitian and certified LEAP therapist from Boston, Massachusetts. LEAP stands for Lifestyle, Eating, and Performance. I help my patients reduce or stop symptoms of inflammation, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, and other inflammatory diseases with food, not medication. You can find me on Instagram at Healing by the Forkful, or you can email me at healingbytheforkfulrd@gmail.com. My mini podcast is short and to the point. A few times a month, I will bring you a new person who has been helped by what I call a personalized anti-inflammation blueprint. Please send me an email if you have any questions or would like to be on the podcast. My hope is to reach and help as many as I can. So, welcome to Healing by the Forkful. Let's get started. Today, we have Elizabeth Yarnell with us. You'll certainly have seen her all over the place with books, and I hear she's got a new podcast out, so that'll be interesting to hear hers, and we'll be able to reach more people so that they can feel more relief. More people can feel more relief. So, Elizabeth, please tell us about. Introduce yourself. Tell us about how you got involved with LEAP. And today, I guess we'll be talking about success stories. I love success stories. It makes it all worth it. So here we go, Elizabeth.
Well, Royletta, it's so great to join you again on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me on. And yes, I'm a huge LEAP proponent and personal success story, as well as a practitioner myself. So I first discovered the wonder of personalized anti-inflammatory diets in 2008 when my son, who at that time was 6, was constantly sick. He chronically vomited. I would say an average of probably 7 times a week. We couldn't figure it out. We'd been to all sorts of medical professionals, his pediatrician, we'd taken him to GI clinics. He also had terrible constipation. Sometimes he would go even as many as 14 days between poops. So he was in a lot of discomfort and pain in his abdominal region, his bowels. I was really worried because I know if you don't poop regularly that you're holding into all these toxins. And my poor 6-year-old, I was very concerned that it was going to shorten his lifespan. Besides which, it was very much affecting his quality of life, obviously, because he would vomit all the time, just spontaneously. And we had tried all sorts of things. We had tried elimination diets. We had tried removing milk, removing dairy, removing soy, removing corn, removing wheat, all these different things that we had tried, and nothing really had seemed to move the needle. And it wasn't until I took him to a naturopathic doctor, and she said, I really think this sounds like food sensitivities. And I said, but he doesn't have anaphylaxis or hives. And she said, well, those are food allergies.
Absolutely.
She said, I'm talking about food sensitivities, which I had never heard of, 2008. And she said, there's this one test called the MRT, the mediator release test, and it does a really good job of identifying food sensitivities. And when I did the test on my son, it's a single blood draw, as you know, and I had to take him to Children's Hospital to get that blood draw. And when the test results came back, it was really, I would say, in many ways, just horrifying, because he was reactive to fully almost half, more than a third of the items that were tested. And still to this day, now that I myself am a certified LEAP therapist and I've conducted hundreds of tests on clients, his is still the worst I've ever seen. And it was no wonder that when we would take out dairy or take out wheat or corn, that it wouldn't really make a difference, because there were 40 other items that we thought
you wouldn't suspect those foods because they're healthy food. So we tell people to eat them all the time, but everybody has their own list of foods that they need to stay away from. Interesting.
Exactly. So, for instance, he was 6 years old and his favorite food was broccoli. Well, we
Which
were
is
so
rare.
right, so proud. What 6-year-old's favorite food is broccoli? So we ate a lot of broccoli. It turned out when we got the test results back that broccoli was super inflammatory for him, and also like things like lemons. Well, he loved lemonade and garlic. I mean, how healthy is garlic?
Lemon, garlic, and broccoli. That's a wonderful dish.
So once we got those test results back and I implemented that based on the LEAP dietary therapy, which is not an elimination diet, as you know, but more of a restricted food diet, it was amazing. At the time that I was so desperate and had taken him to get tested, he had fallen off the height and weight charts.
Wow.
And which was scary. He was failure to thrive. Within 6 weeks of starting the LEAP dietary therapy, he had gained 10 pounds. He had grown 1.5 to 2
That's
inches.
quickly, especially the inch and a half. The weight, yes, but the 1.5 inches is wow.
Like literally the inflammation had been holding him constricted and down. And then once we stopped keeping him so inflamed unintentionally, inadvertently, he just shot up and his mind started working. He stopped having tantrums all the time. He tested into the gifted and talented program. I mean, just amazing results. He started sleeping through the night. This was a 6-year-old who had never slept through the night and was still wetting the bed. And it turned out
screaming.
His body was screaming, and his colon, which, as I mentioned, was so backed up with poop because he was so constipated all the time. When we took him for abdominal x-rays to see if maybe there was an anatomical obstruction that was going on, what the radiologist told us, he said, that he could see the stool backed up in the colon. It was so dense. It was showing up on x-rays like bone. And that that colon, that distended full colon, was pushing against his ureter. So he wasn't able to sense when there was pee that he needed to push out. And so that's why he was still wetting the bed.
Do they think it took that long to become so impacted and so?
I'm going to say his whole life. So 6 years.
Wow.
And I used to go through extreme interventions like enemas and laxatives. Once I remember I gave him 6 because the laxatives weren't working. And so I gave him 6 squares of a chocolate X-Lax bar, which is Senna. And I gave him Senna poisoning, right?
Oh my God.
So poor kid, he still didn't poop it, but he had Senna poisoning.
Wow, what a strong kid you have.
So doing the LEAP dietary therapy was so life-changing and so radical for our family that's when I decided to become a LEAP practitioner myself, because I realized that this really was something that nobody knew about or understood, that this could be a factor, these food sensitivities. We were still back in 2008. We were still at the time when we were not even sure that celiac disease was really caused by gluten. There wasn't really gluten-free. There weren't that many options. People weren't doing customized or a lot of dietary changes in that way. So this was very early back in the day.
I just want to go back for a second. So we talked about it affected his growth. It affected his sleep. It affected his mind and how he was processing information. Not that that's not enough, because that's plenty and it's so amazing. Is there anything else that you think you'd want to add to that list?
His emotions, right? Because his tantrums.
Right. If you're not feeling well, you're going to be cranky for sure.
Not only that, but if your body is inflamed, your brain is inflamed too. And when your brain is inflamed, it's very hard to think rationally.
Yes.
Your primal emotions take over, like rage and anger take over, and they push out more gentle emotions like logic and happiness, things like that.
Very good point. Yeah, that's awesome.
So what I realized in going through this was that after I went through the trouble of changing his diet and witnessing the transformation in him, when I changed his diet, the first thing I tried to do when we received his test results was I said, okay, well, this shelf in the pantry and this part of the refrigerator, these are going to be for foods for my son. Everybody else, we're going to eat like we normally did, because I was already a very healthy from scratch whole foods person and cook for the family. But after about a week, that I realized that was a recipe for a nervous breakdown. And I personally started throwing food around because it was very frustrating. And I said, that's it. The whole family is going to go on his diet. And outside the house, you know, the other members of the family, you can eat what you want. But inside the house, we are all going to eat what he eats. And we're going to do this in solidarity with him so he doesn't feel like he's deprived.
Yes. Support is key.
Right.
It's very important to keep up with it.
But I noticed that the rest of us were having some improvements too. My daughter, who was 2 years younger than him, she had always had this chronically runny nose, and it was always clear mucus, but it just kind of always running. In fact, in her preschool, the preschool teachers would call her runny nose girl or something like that, because they were constantly wiping her nose. But it wasn't as urgent, right, as my son's constipation and vomiting. So I didn't have the bandwidth to deal with it. But within a couple weeks of this new diet, that completely cleared up and never came back. So it turned out there was something that she was reacting to as well. And I noticed for myself, and I have multiple sclerosis, that I started feeling better too following my son's diet. And so I became much more interested in the connection. I had realized that there was a connection between processed foods and multiple sclerosis, but I hadn't, and I kind of had thought that the secret was whole foods versus processed foods for MS. But once I realized that we could get even more specific with the MRT and LEAP, I realized that made a lot more sense. And when I did the MRT for myself, I could discover that some of the things I thought were super healthy in my life were actually keeping me inflamed, like lettuce.
Before we get back to finish with your story, can we just go back to your kids? I'm just interested because each test is so individualized. But you were saying that some of the things that you did for your son actually worked for your daughter. I know it's been a while since they've been tested, but are you saying that a number of their foods that they were having problems with were similar foods, or how did that work?
You know, I've never actually MRT tested my daughter, but I call it incidental improvement. And I see this a lot with my clients. And I always encourage clients, if you're going to follow the LEAP diet for one family member, just do it for everybody. And you might see incidental improvements in other family members too. And it's hard to pin down like what that was. For why my daughter improved too, or why I even improved too from my son's LEAP diet, but it happens a lot. And it can be very difficult to implement LEAP dietary therapy for more than one family member in a household at the same time, because finding those crossovers of foods that you're both non-reactive to can be very limiting. So I usually recommend, if we have multiple family members in the same household who are experiencing problems, let's start with the one who's most in crisis. Like my son was most in crisis. The whole family, we're going to just overhaul everything in the household. The whole family is going to follow that diet. And then after a couple, 6 weeks or a couple months, we can assess and see, okay, well, who's now next still in crisis? Who do we need to work on next? And then we can start a LEAP dietary therapy for them and do testing on them. And it's much easier because by that point,
you're used to things being cut out. But you're used to being your foods being a little more selected for you. But I wanted you to bring that up because most of the families that I've dealt with, there's only been one person who has had to go on this protocol. And in your house, there are 3, but then there were siblings, and it just kind of meshed. So I just wanted to let our listeners know about that. But I'm so interested to hear about your story as well. Oh, you know what? Before we even do that, how are your kids now? This is years later.
So my son is 23. He went through a little bit of a rebellious period as a teen where he's like, Mom, I'm not going to eat what you tell me to eat. I'm going to go out and get fast food with my friends. And I would try to reason with him. He's very, very smart, obviously. And then when he went to college, I just said to him, look, you're not living with me anymore, and you can decide how you want to feel. You understand, as much as you don't want to admit it, that there is a connection between what you eat and how you feel. And if you decide that you don't want to have migraines or be constipated or whatever it is, then that's within your power to choose what you want to eat.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to your story. This is so exciting.
So for me, with multiple sclerosis, and I was diagnosed with MS in 1999 after I went to sleep one night and woke up the next morning blind in my right eye. And multiple sclerosis, like other autoimmune diseases, is an inflammatory disease. It's based in inflammation. Multiple sclerosis is a degenerative autoimmune disorder where there's inflammation around in the myelin sheaths that surround the nerves in the brain and the spinal cord that interrupts the flow of communication between the brain and the body. And especially in 1999, when I was diagnosed, and I asked my MS doctor, and I said, well, what if I change my diet and eat a healthier diet? And he said, well, that's not going to make any difference in the course of your disease. Yeah, we should all eat a healthy diet, but he couldn't tell me what that might be, of course, because they don't teach nutrition in medical school. And they certainly don't teach food sensitivities in medical school. In fact, they're like not even in the books. And he was very unhelpful and very discouraging. And he's basically like, take the MS drugs, which are super toxic and all injectable or infusion based, which means they're just pouring into these pharmaceuticals are just pouring into your body. And the goal of MS therapies is really to suppress your entire immune system based on the theory that MS and other autoimmune diseases are a result of an overactive immune system that is attacking the own body. Well, in the intervening 27 years since I've been diagnosed, and I learned about LEAP, and I was so inspired that I actually went back to school and became a traditional naturopath and studied more and opened up a clinic called the Inflammation Academy, where I help people understand what hidden inflammation is doing to their body and how it's manifesting in symptoms, and then how to address it.
Because you don't know until it's too late, and it's really knocked you down. It's knocked you for a loop, and you're like, oh, what am I going to do now? Yeah.
Right. And you may not connect those things, right? You may not connect the reason that you're so depressed or the reason that you have so much rage is inflammation. And that inflammation, you may be triggering it inadvertently by your morning coffee, for example. Or, for instance, I had a lead client who had constant itchiness all over his body, just itchy. And we took him through the MRT and the LEAP dietary therapy, and it turned out that it was caffeine that was causing him to be so itchy all the time. And he drank multiple cups of coffee every day. And so he never would have cut out the coffee if we hadn't done this, and we hadn't had this kind of laboratory result that showed definitively that it was caffeine that was causing a problem for him. So there can be all kinds of symptoms. When I talk on podcasts and I work with new clients, I take them through kind of the whole body. And I say, okay, well, let's start at the top. Do you have headaches? Do you get migraines? Do you have brain fog? Are you emotional? Do you have depression or anxiety? That can all be caused from inflammation. And then we go into the sinuses. Do you get runny or stuffy nose all the time? Do you have sinus pain? And then we go down into the chest area. Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have heart issues? Do you breathing, asthma issues? And then we go down, how's your digestion? Do you get acid reflux? Do you have cramping after you eat? Do you have incomplete digestion? Do you have a lot of gas, a lot of burping, or at the other end? And then we go into the bowels. Do you poop every day?
Yeah.
Because not pooping every day, just because you might feel like it's your normal that you only poop every 3 days, that is not normal.
Not normal.
That is not normal and not healthy. And that's a sign of inflammation in the colon. And what I realized, especially from my experience with my son, is that constipation really has almost nothing to do with the amount of fiber or the amount of water you intake or all these things that we have been taught. It's really about inflammation in the colon. And if we just focus on reducing that inflammation, then that inflammation in the colon is going to go down and decrease too. And then, your bowels are
a lot easier. Yeah.
Working now. Yes.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Give us some more information on your MS and your particular foods that you had to reduce to get rid of your inflammation, and how that's working with medications. We talked about how toxic they are, and they clearly are. And I should just say, no one go off of their medications without talking to their doctor. I'm a registered dietitian. I am not a medical doctor. But can you just kind of talk us through that process?
Yep. And I would agree. I will give that disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor either. And any medications that any listener might be on is between you and your medical doctor. But even if you're on a medication, you still have to eat, right? So you might as well be eating the foods that your body is happy with, and not the foods that are causing inflammation in your body. Exactly. Right? So for me, when I was diagnosed with MS, my diet at that time, and had been for the previous 10 years leading up to it, the whole decade of my 20s, was based around Diet Coke, Crystal Light, and gummy bears. So, and as a registered dietitian, you're probably like, oh, that is horrific.
We're human.
Absolutely horrific diet. And those were the staple foods in my apartment. And otherwise, I really just ate out, or ate leftovers, or ate fast food, or simply skipped the meal. So I didn't have a healthy diet leading into this. And a big factor for me was I had to stop eating all of those additives and preservatives and artificial sweeteners that I had been living off of, because I was a child, a teenager in the 80s, and I really bought into the line that aspartame and NutraSweet were the best things since sliced bread, right? And we were really force-fed that in many ways. Like, that was a huge advertising campaign. Look, you can cut down your sugar consumption, you can reduce all your calories, and you can just drink Diet Coke instead.
You can just drink Coke.
Exactly. So for me, that was a big part of my dietary change and my own evolution, was to focus on whole foods, which by definition can't have any of those artificial additives and preservatives and flavors and colors added to it, because they're whole foods, versus processed foods, which can have all those things added to it. And so that was a big evolution for me. But what I realized going through this with my son was that really wasn't enough for somebody who has already tipped over into chronic inflammation, which is autoimmunity. And so when I took the LEAP test, or the MRT, and did the LEAP dietary therapy myself, and discovered some of my favorite foods that I had really been living on, like, what do you eat when you decide you want to be healthier? You eat a salad. Well, it turns out for me, lettuce was one of my most inflammatory foods, and it was keeping me in symptoms of multiple sclerosis. And for me, what lettuce does, because I have MS, is it causes issues with my gait and my walking and lifting up my feet. Mm-hmm. So one time
you get the most benign food because it's so much water. You're like, what's going on? But exactly. What a difference.
Right. People ask me, well, what is it in lettuce that causes a problem? I have no idea. It's just lettuce, right? That causes it's lettuce as a whole that my body has decided it doesn't like. One night I was at my sister's house, and the dinner was all very safe for me. And then after dinner, her husband brought out some limoncello, and I thought, oh, this is great. I am fine with vodka. I am fine personally with lemon, even though my son wasn't okay with lemon. I was fine with lemon. So I can drink limoncello. And I had some limoncello, and the next morning I woke up and I had drop foot, which is a very common MS symptom, but I had never had that before. It's basically where you can't pick up your feet well. It feels like you're walking in scuba flippers, and you start tripping over your feet because you're not, like, the muscles, the nerves are not sending the message to lift your foot up far enough. And so I was tripping over my feet because I was having drop foot. And when we looked at the bottle of limoncello, it turned out it had yellow food dye in it.
Ugh.
And I was like, food dye. And who would have suspected that an alcoholic drink would have
women, it should be yellow. Why does it need to be extra yellow?
Right. Should feel very safe and all things that I was familiar with and that I knew wouldn't have a problem for me. So the secret, as we learned with LEAP and with dietary therapy, is that if you can identify what caused the inflammation and you can then move to avoid it and don't continue to keep yourself inflamed by continuing to ingest it, then that inflammation, if everything else you're doing is anti-inflammatory, that inflammation can recede. And then within a couple of days, I no longer have drop foot.
That's amazing. That just blows my mind, because it just seems like you would need to be taking medication for weeks or months at a time for something like that to actually clear up. I mean, even a cold lasts longer than that. That's just amazing.
Right. And my goal is to have symptoms resolve within 24 hours of appearance by just reverting back to the safest, least inflammatory foods for your body once we know what those are through the MRT and LEAP. And that's how I counsel my clients to do, and it's very, very effective. In the beginning, it might take a few days longer, but as you go further and the longer you stay on an anti-inflammatory diet, the more tolerance the higher your tolerance threshold rises, and the more you can tolerate things, and the faster your recovery becomes.
It's amazing. So amazing. Have you worked with other people who have MS as well? Can you give us some stories about success stories about some of your other patients?
Yep. So I started the Fight MS with Food project in 2008 after I worked with my son and decided to go down this path with the MRT. And then my clinic, the Inflammation Academy, I have at any given time, I don't know, at least 50% of my Academy members have multiple sclerosis, and the rest of them probably have another autoimmune disease, whether or not it has been diagnosed, because these are the people who are in chronic distress who come to me because they realize they can take as many drugs as they want and they might just continue to get worse and worse.
Right.
And so they're looking for, they have realized that autoimmune conditions aren't something that a magic pill or a drug infusion is going to solve completely. Like, it may help relieve some symptoms, but you have to
take something else.
Right. You have to take action yourself. You have to be empowered in your own life, and you have to be engaged in your own healing, really, to have a long-term and beneficial outcome for your life. And the way I look at it is that, you know what? My life means the most to me. It doesn't mean as much to my doctors. They care, but not as much as I do.
Right.
As I want to be ambulatory. And when I was diagnosed in 1999, I was told that I would be in a wheelchair within 10 years. And here I am in 2026. And
dancing.
Still doing jazzercise, you know. If you met me, you would not know that I had an autoimmune disease, that there is something wrong with me. And for the most part, on most days, I'm completely normal and healthy. And then sometimes it happens to me too. It happens to all of us. Sometimes something will sneak in and affect me, and I won't have noticed it, or I won't have realized it was part of something I ate, or I was out to dinner or something like that, because I want to live my life and I want to be able to eat out and all of those things. But I have a curl that's just going crazy right now. Sorry. I'm looking at it going, oh, what's going on with that curl? But that's okay, because I know how to resolve it and how to get beyond it and how to reclaim where I was and get back to my baseline.
So a couple of things there. We have complete control over what we eat for the most part. We do have to watch out for when we are going out to eat. And even when we're shopping on our own at home, a lot of different companies are unfortunately putting different fillers and things because it's cheaper. So it's something that we work with ongoing, because we're always looking at labels. We're always checking things out. So it's just important that you stay vigilant on following what your list has.
That is so well said, because for years I ate these really great organic spelt tortillas. And spelt, even though spelt is a gluten grain, it is a grain that my body was accepting of, and it was fine. And for many years I was eating these spelt tortillas all the time because it's so great to have a tortilla. And then I wasn't feeling well, and I was gaining weight and feeling like I wasn't thinking as clearly. And then one day I looked at the back of the spelt tortillas, and without any notice, they had added wheat to them. Yeah. Without any notice. There was nothing on the package that said, oh, by the way, new recipe, or anything that would have warned me that they had changed something.
Yes, they will put like stickers on apples that say no gluten on them, but here they won't say, here's an update. That's mind-blowing. Unbelievable.
Right. Well, and because spelt is a gluten grain, they felt like, we can just add wheat and it'll be the same. But because of what our wheat is here in the U.S., and it's so hybridized and so bastardized and so covered in glyphosate, and spelt is an ancient grain, and yes, it is in the same family as wheat, but it is less hybridized. It's much more much closer to the original grain. And when we talk about gluten grains or gluten proteins, our current wheat has 17 different elements in this gluten protein, whereas spelt has 2. Right.
It's just mind blowing, the things that we've done to different foods. So tell us about some of your patients that you've worked with.
So many patients. I had one patient who was confined, bedridden, and in a kind of I don't even know what this kind of clinic is called, a long-term care facility. And they prepared all of her food for her, and they wouldn't even change any of her food for her. So she literally ordered all of her food from Amazon, and she had a box underneath her bed where she would keep her safe food for her. And it was amazing, because by the end of the time we were working together, she was pulling herself up to standing, which she hadn't done in a year.
That's amazing.
Yes. And regaining her strength and doing online dating, which was so hopeful.
Well, that's part of quality of life too. And
Absolutely.
she never would have done that had it not been for the changes in her diet and her feeling better and wanting to enjoy her life more fully. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
I
amazing.
would say across the board, 98% of the clients that I've worked with now for the last 15 years who I've brought through the LEAP dietary therapy have experienced significant improvement in their lives. I had one client, he didn't have MS, but he had been in a car accident and he had chronic back pain. And so much so that he had undergone 2 spinal surgeries and come out of it no better, still in terrible back pain. Young man, like maybe 29.
Wow.
And he came to me and I said, well, I don't know if dietary therapy will help you because this is a anatomical structural thing. You were in a car accident. And I said, but, reducing inflammation systemically can only help everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And he was desperate. His doctor said the only thing he could offer him was another spinal surgery. And he really didn't want to do that. And so he did the LEAP dietary therapy. And within a month, he was playing beach volleyball.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. So amazing. And for this gentleman, how long was it, the typical 2 to 3 weeks, or is it more of like a 6 weeks, 6 months? Do you remember?
How long did it take him to that?
Yeah, it's different for everybody.
It is. I think most people start feeling differently, usually within a week or two.
Yes.
And then, but then they really need to continue on for at least 6 weeks. I think I look at it like this is a new lifestyle. This is just a new way of eating. You're just going to not look at this like a diet, like that has a limited time effect. This is just a new way of eating. Like,
way of living. Yep.
You're just going to have coconut milk instead of dairy milk now.
90% of the time I still follow what I have, or for example, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have surgery in the spring. I'm going to actually go back to my phase 1 just to make sure that I have as much inflammation gone so I can heal faster and be ready to play ball when when the doctor says I can move,
Right, which is so wise. And lately I've been getting really into epigenetics and DNA, and one of the things I've brought into my practice lately is functional genomics. So we look at the DNA, and it's very interesting on what we can see from the MRT test, and we correlate it with the DNA, because your DNA doesn't change, right, your whole life. Right. So like my DNA tells me I am red reactive to dairy products. So I will never be able to incorporate dairy products back into my life. I kind of already knew that because they make me so miserable. But it's good to see. So that dairy turned up red on my MRT test too. And I can see, well, you know what? That is not only my body is saying that it's sensitive to, but my genes are telling me no dairy for you.
Yep. Red flag is just telling you, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I know you have more stories. Give us a few more.
You got some more stories?
Yes, I just love it because I think this is really important, because when I first started doing a podcast, I was really focusing on the fact that I felt better in like 5 days. Most people say 2 weeks, and it is not an easy process, but it is doable, and it's absolutely life-changing. So I want to be able to tell people, yeah, it's not so easy all the time, but the changes that you get, the quality of life, and how much better you move around, how much better you think, how much better you feel is certainly worth it. Like, I just can't imagine my life before. Well, actually, I do imagine. I know how bad it was. I couldn't move. I was just having such a hard time. So when people are just hemming and hawing, like, oh, there's a cost for the test. Should I do this? It's not all covered by insurance. Should I do this? Yes, you should, because you're paying all this money for, doctor's appointments, for treatments, for medications, for physical therapy, occupational therapy, which are needed. I still go back to PT every once in a while, and they're just like, it must be time for Royletta to come around. But it's part of my maintenance plan, and I don't know what I would do without my physical therapist. And so it's definitely a team approach, but I really want people to know it's not easy, but it is so worth it. That's why I want to hear so many of these success stories.
Great. I have 2 stories or 3 stories I want to share. Let me start with a young girl. Her name was Emily, or is Emily, I should say. She was 15 when she came to me. Her parents brought her to me. They were quite concerned. She had been diagnosed with MS, and her nutritionist or her registered dietitian at the clinic had put her on a paleo diet. And so they were following this paleo diet. Her parents, she was an only child. Her parents were quite focused on this, and they were all very supportive. But she was going downhill, so far downhill that she had to drop out of high school. Wow. And when she came to me and we did the MRT, we could see that, oh my gosh, a paleo diet was like the worst diet this poor girl could have been on. Like almost every single meat was reactive for her. Wow. So once we kind of flipped it around and put her more on a carbohydrate-based diet based on what her body was saying was not reactive for her. It was incredible. And she was able to go back to school, and she graduated valedictorian.
Wow. That's amazing.
So she's such a great, and every so often her parents will send me a little update on her, and she's just soaring. It's amazing. Another example is a woman, a 54-year-old woman who was a corporate professional, and she had MS, has MS. You never cure, right? This is never a cure. Right. You'll have it.
The quality of life, it's what makes it, you know?
Right, because you can manage it just like I can decide, do I want to have an MS attack today? Let me go get some yellow food dye. And then I will have one. Or I can decide, well, I'm going to stay away from that, and then I won't have those MS symptoms. So this woman, she was in the corporate world, and what she really wanted to do was go to this big conference. It was going to be important for her career trajectory that she show her face at this conference, but she was very worried because she had MS, and she wasn't sure she would be able to walk through the airport. She had to use a cane if she walked more really than like outside her house. She needed that cane, and she was uncomfortable and nervous about it. And we put her on, we did her MRT testing, found out one of the things she was very sensitive to was strawberries. Well, she had strawberries in her garden, and she had been kind of binging on strawberries all summer as she picked them out of her garden. That was just one of the things. Within 6 weeks, she was able to go to the conference without a cane. She was able to walk through. She brought the cane in case she needed it, but she ended up leaving it in her hotel room the whole conference, so she was able to go and give her presentation and be a superstar that she is. And then another story that I love is this young boy. He was 13 when he was diagnosed with MS. And at that time, he was in a full wheelchair, and he was very dedicated and stubborn, and he was sure he was going to walk again. So he was using 2 canes to really like pull his legs and try to walk again. And he came to me. We did the MRT test and put him on the LEAP dietary therapy, and it was amazing. As long as he stayed on his special diet, he was thriving. And in fact, within a year, actually within 4 months, his mom wrote me an email, and she talked about how she was watching him in their backyard doing forestry management. They live in a very rural area with his father, wielding a chainsaw, chopping down trees. Yep. And then she sent me another note that he got married, and that his wife was all into the diet, and they were completely following it. And he built his own log cabin, and just amazing. So, and I remember one time he went over to his aunt and uncle's house for like a game night, and they served something that he was starting to react to, and he asked his aunt, he said, "Do you have any turmeric?" And she went and she pulled out some turmeric out, and he was able to make himself what I call turmeric milk. So turmeric with milk and black peppercorns, which is very anti-inflammatory. And he was able to recognize that he was having MS symptoms, that it was due to inflammation, and he was able to employ on his own as a teenager an anti-inflammatory remedy and wake up the next day just fine.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right, you said you have 3, so there's one more, and then maybe I'll let you go, or maybe I'll ask you for another one. It's just it makes you so proud of doing this, because there's so many naysayers, and it really works. It works. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just amazing.
It really works. I had another woman. She was a young mother with very young children, and her goal was to be able to take her kids to Disneyland and to be able to walk through Disneyland and with her kids.
A lot of able-bodied people with no diagnoses have a problem with that. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. It's a long day when you go to Disneyland, for sure. And we put her on the LEAP dietary therapy, and within 2 months, she was able to take her kids through Disneyland, and it was so joyous for her to be able to achieve that goal. And she told me, she said, I'm never going to go back to the way I was eating before, because I realize now that that's what put me in that place where I was.
It's just amazing. All right, so we need one more success story, and then we need, if you had somebody who was on the fence about doing this, what would you tell them? But let's have one more success
story. Okay.
No, sorry.
So, well, just because when you said somebody's on the fence, like everybody's on the fence, right? Because nobody wants to spend the money, because it is something that, of course, insurance companies don't cover, because they're about pharmaceuticals. And if this is a non-pharmaceutical solution, and in fact, a solution that may cause you to cease taking pharmaceuticals, they don't think that's valid. They can't see the benefit behind paying for this therapy. So it is something that's out of pocket for most people, and it's not cheap. There's the hard costs of the actual testing, but there's only so much you can really get out of it, or most people by themselves. You really benefit from having a certified LEAP therapist like you and I, who understands how to interpret the test results and how to apply them. Absolutely. And how to help you put it through, because it can be super overwhelming, like it was for me when I received my son's test results back, and I'm like, whoa, like half of everything that I was feeding him before, I can't feed him now. What am I going to feed him? Right? What should he be eating? Okay, so let me run through my little database of who I want to talk about. I want to talk about another child. I have a 2-year-old I can talk about who just.
All right, so let's okay, then I'm cheating. Let's do a child, and then let's do somebody who's older, who's kind of like, why me? I've given up. There's nothing, you know what I mean? Nothing I can do. And then I promise I have to let you go, because I have an appointment, so I'll have to let you go soon. But yes, there we go. How about that?
Okay, so I worked with a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, I guess she was, who had significant joint pain and inflammation in her issues. In fact, her joints would be frozen up like this, and her parents would say she would knuckle walk when she was crawling on her knuckles, because her joints, she couldn't really move her fingers really well. And of course, she was just a baby, so she couldn't really talk about how she was feeling. Mm-hmm. So we did the MRT and the LEAP dietary therapy on her, and we got to a point where she was much, much better and had many more days where she was able to move her fingers. And then her parents noticed that when they spent 2 weeks in Hawaii swimming in the ocean every day, she even got better and her joints were much more flexible. And they thought, well, maybe we should move to be near a beach. Maybe it's the altitude, maybe it's the humidity in the air.
Water. Yeah.
What we realized it was actually a trace mineral deficiency. So when you're in the ocean, you can absorb a lot of trace minerals through the ocean water osmotically through your skin.
Right.
And that's why she was doing so much better. So once we added in some trace mineral therapy in with her dietary therapy, she became a normal kid.
Whoa.
It was amazing.
That's awesome.
So I've worked with lots and lots of older people, right? Especially because many people get to the age for MS, it normally affects people between the ages of 20 and 40. And that's when they are first diagnosed and they first have their main symptoms that lead them to a diagnosis of MS. So there's lots of people who are in their 40s and 50s who have MS who don't understand what's going on. They're doing everything that their doctors tell them to do. They're taking all the medications. They're following everything, but they're getting worse and worse and worse, especially in a wheelchair. So I had one dad who was in a wheelchair, and he was very resistant to this whole idea. His wife had brought him in, and she said, I really think we should try dietary therapy. And he was like, I don't want to change my diet. And so he was willing to try it out for a short amount of time. And within the first 3 weeks of his new diet, it was amazing. He was able to get out of his wheelchair and play on the floor with his kids. But then he made that conscious choice, and he decided that he wanted to have the foods he wanted to have. And within 2 weeks, he was back in that wheelchair.
Unbelievable. Wow.
You know, for some people, their Cheetos are more important than their quality of life.
Yeah.
And it's sad. My LEAP mentor always says to me, some people will, some people won't. There's nothing you can do about it. And she's right. I can't sit there and force feed somebody the right food or berate them for eating the wrong food. They're an adult and they can make that decision on their own. And it's really, how much do you want to help yourself feel better? Or do you just want to give up and go downhill, which that can certainly happen.
Absolutely. Well, I have so enjoyed this conversation, and we will do it again, because it's just wonderful. Yeah, you just make me feel so proud of what we do, and yeah, it just makes me feel very, very excited. So we're going to let Elizabeth go, because she's got so much to do. But she did say that she has started a podcast as well. So we'll be linking that information in the show notes. And remember, inflammation helps so much, from joint pain, muscle pain. It even helps with blood sugars. It helps with migraines. It helps so many things.
Oh my gosh, I should have shared the story about the woman who got off all of her diabetes medication from
But we haven't closed yet, so you can do you can do it. I'm like, what time is it? I have a couple of minutes before my next appointment comes in. So do tell.
Well, it reminded me of a woman. She was, I think, in her late 60s, and she was a diabetic and on taking insulin, and she was getting worse and worse, and her mobility was getting worse and worse. And her big thing was she was having trouble shifting herself from her wheelchair to the commode. So she wanted to be able to do that by herself, right? She didn't want to have to wait for somebody to help her go to the bathroom. And we changed her diet based on her LEAP results, her MRT results, and we did LEAP dietary therapy. And she became very excited about a certain recipe for tahini-based cookies, because she had a sweet tooth and she wanted cookies. And so I gave her a recipe to use basically tahini, what is sesame seed paste. Sure. Sesame seed paste cookies. She became obsessed with those. And by the end of the time, by the end, I guess the month and a half or 2 months that we were working together, she was easily able to shift herself in and out of her wheelchair over to the commode, no problems. She was baking cookies for everyone in her complex. She had worked with her doctor and reduced her insulin dependence and was hoping that she would be able to get off insulin completely. She had lost a ton of weight. I mean, just really amazing.
Her dignity and life back.
Yeah.
And a new joy of cooking, baking.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely amazing.
And you can do it even from a wheelchair, right? You can bake even from a wheelchair.
That's absolutely right. Right. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been a joy spending some time with you this afternoon. I will again share the information in the show notes, and we will have you back giving more success stories so that we can help even more people make significant life changes and improve their life outlooks. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Violetta, for letting me share all these great, inspiring stories and remind myself, too, about why I do this as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much.